You know, when I was growing up, when I was a teenager, when I was a young man in my early 20s, it was pretty easy to spot a Nazi. You know, they were skinheads, they ran in packs, they ran in gangs, and you can spot them a mile away.
We need to open our eyes. There's over 2 million illegal immigrants bedding down in this state tonight. This state spent $3 billion last year on services for those people who had no right to be here in the first place. $3 billion. Every night, thousands like some fucking piñata exploded. Don't laugh. There's nothing funny going on here. This is about your life and mine. It's about decent, hardworking Americans falling through the cracks and getting the shaft because their government cares more about the constitutional rights of a bunch of people who aren't even citizens of this country. We're losing our right to pursue our destiny. We're losing our freedom so that a bunch of fucking foreigners can come in here and exploit our country. And this isn't something that's going on far away. This isn't something that's happening places we can't do anything about it. It's happening right here, right in our neighborhood, right in that building behind you.
What is up, you heathens and demons, you beautiful, blasphemous people? Welcome back to A Raging Atheist. I'm your boy Nakasuchi, and this week we're going to be looking at the alt-right in this country, in particular a very revealing interview that a member of the alt-right has given to TYT. But before I even do my whole Patreon spiel, I would like to just warn you guys that there's a whole lot of construction going on outside today, and I'm trying to film 4 videos. I'm trying to film every video in this series today, and I got a lot of construction going on today, wouldn't that figure? So hopefully I can get through this without too much background noise, and if there is, I'm sorry guys. Now time for my Patreon spiel, because Patreon is changing. I am getting ahead. I'm able to put all of my videos on Patreon first, so if you would like to be one of the first people to see my videos, you want to become a Patreon member, and you get that perk even if you're just a $1 member. Every Patreon member is going to get that perk. I'm also doing after show interviews that right now I'm going to include for every Patreon member as well. But as Patreon grows, that could be a perk that gets changed later. But right now, there's going to be a lot of new Patreon content coming to Patreon. If you would like to become a patron, link is in the description below. Alright, so to start this series, a series that I'm calling They're Wearing Suits, Y'all, we're going to really look at the beginning of an interview that was on TYT that I found and I think more people need to be aware of. If you've seen this interview and you fall along the political spectrum that I do, I think that you'd be deeply disturbed. But before we get into the interview, I want to talk about my opening statement, because it's true. Like, when I grew up, you could fairly easily spot a Nazi.
That is cult-like behavior.
They were young, angst-driven people that were frustrated about immigration law mainly, but also by the melting pot that America had become. And those frustrations hasn't went away, but the ability to spot them easily has. They're no longer those skidheads running in packs on the streets. Now they're organized, now they're wearing business suits, and now they're going around speaking at colleges, at conferences. They have found, through the alt-right, a way to legitimize themselves. And a lot of people are calling them out, but also more people, I think, are actually getting sucked into this alt-right narrative.
So because there is a white majority today, therefore it's natural and it should be considered constitutional to legislate in the interests of a continued white-dominated government.
Well, I would look at it like this. Imagine if we were trying to, if somebody, look at Japan. You do have maybe 1% of the population or so, which is non-Japanese.
They're never allowed to become citizens ever.
Yeah, and so, is anyone screaming at them racist? Is anyone demonizing them and saying that they want to just, do horrible things to other people, that they think they're better than everybody else? No, that's simply not true.
So meet the New Age Nazi, Mr. D'Amigo, who is a white separatist, white supremacist, who believes that white people should have their own ethno-state, a follower of Richard Spencer, and we're going to see just a little bit of Richard Spencer, but not in the interview, but speaking. So meet Mr. D'Amigo, and I just have to tell you, Trumpers, if Nazis are endorsing your guy, it might be time to look at your guy, and it might be time to really stop fighting the narrative that you're Nazis. Like, you might not be Nazis, but you're certainly hanging around with them. But let's get into the interview. I took that clip just to show you what he is. Let's get into the beginning of the interview, and let's hear about, his love for Donald Trump.
There's this mantra of diversity is our greatest strength. You'll hear just about everyone on the political spectrum say that, perhaps up until maybe, I can't think of a time Donald Trump said that. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. And maybe that's the reason why there is so much angst and anger against him, is because he hasn't paid proper reverence to really the religion of our time. And that's
diversity.
Yes, the idea that diversity is an endless good in and of itself, and that it should never be critiqued.
So his assessment of why we dislike Donald Trump so much is off. Like, it's only like one little element that he's including. He's focusing on Donald Trump being a fucking racist. And a lot of people get turned off by Donald Trump being a racist. And he's not calling Donald Trump a racist. He's just saying, like, Donald Trump obviously doesn't believe in diversity. And he doesn't. Donald Trump's a fucking racist. But, I mean, that's just a small reason, really. Like, I mean, that's just, like, your personal stupid-ass beliefs, dude. I mean, a lot of us don't like him for that, but the reason, like, we're staunchly against him, the reason we're trying to get him out of office isn't because he's a fucking racist. It's because he's broken the Constitution, he's broken laws repeatedly. The Republican Party is supposed to be the party of, like, law and order, and yet they're allowing this man to break law. They're justifying him breaking laws. They're now arguing that he can't break laws because he's the president or emperor, because they're all, fanboys. So Trump's racism is just a very small, minute part of why we're actually against Donald Trump. But you're not going to spin that narrative. You're just going to spin about, well, Trump's an obvious racist. A lot of people don't like that, so they're against him. No, I mean, we're against his racist policy, but it's the policy, not his personal beliefs. If anything, it shows, like, the Trump supporters are willing to accept racism. They're willing to accept a racist president. That doesn't necessarily make them racist, but it does point out biases.
What's the way to reverse diversity? I mean,
I would say it's a matter of changing our values. I think if we change our values, if we realize racial, ethnic, and religious diversity in a political system actually creates a very hostile atmosphere, then I think we'll start moving towards policies that begin to move us away from that.
Immigration is not popular. And if you actually look at some things about Donald Trump, the proposed Muslim ban and so on, those coincided with these spikes in popularity. Trump has proven the power of these ideas.
So there, at the end of that clip, you have Richard Spencer, one of the most well-known Nazis in America, endorsing Trump policy and telling you that because of Donald Trump, that these Nazi immigration policies are now accepted. And he's not wrong. He's not wrong. Many people that would not have accepted these policies coming from the mouths of Richard Spencer accept these policies coming from the mouth of Donald Trump.
That is cult-like behavior.
Because he's their Republican guy. He's their God-elect to a lot of these evangelical Christians. They're willing to accept anything he does, and they feel it deep in their souls, right? Like they have this racism that's been pushed down because it's not socially acceptable anymore, but it's still there, and they don't even really like to look at it.
Prior to 1965, America actually had immigration policies that were set in place to maintain the racial and cultural balance of the country. In 1965, they passed the Hart-Celler Act, and when that act was passed, the legislators who passed it claimed that the act would not change the racial or ethnic diversity of the country, and that it wouldn't change the amount of immigrants coming into the country every year. And that was actually completely false.
All right, so here's how white nationalists, white supremacists, white separatists utilize what could be truth to fuel their propaganda. So let's talk about this Immigration Act of 1965. Now, prior to 1965, America did have much more stringent immigration laws. He's not wrong about that. But we weren't always like that. For the first several decades of the country after the Revolutionary War, of course, we accepted all immigrants in. And most of those immigrants were European Americans. But we accepted them all in because we really needed to populate the new country that we had just stolen from those red people. Well, the red people first, and then we stole it back from the British who had stolen it from the red people. I mean, it's complex. And again, he is correct that the idea was not to change the composition of the immigration coming in. In the 1960s, 90% of all immigration coming in was white Europeans. There's no denying that. And there's also no denying that this is the act that fundamentally changed us into the melting pot that we have become, that we are, that we always ideally wanted to be. We wanted a place for freedom for everybody. And now, because of this act, there is a place in this world, hypothetically, that you can come here and have the same freedoms as everybody else. These Republicans are trying to take that away because they fear for their whiteness. So to put that into perspective, you know, in the 1960s, it was 90% of immigrants coming in were European. In the 1980s, it was 10% of migrants coming in were European. So while this neo-Nazi is using correct information, he is twisting it though, because with these policies, you never really know what the effect is going to be. You can have an intended effect, but until they're enacted, you can't know what the effect is going to be. And the effect has been to create this diverse melting pot that we have, this diverse melting pot that we should have always been, this diverse melting pot that has made us one of the strongest nations in the world. You know, and just because a bunch of white people in the 1960s who were raised the way they were in the country that they were raised into didn't intend for this country to become more brown, it has, and we are a richer country for it, except for the slim minority of white people that fear their own shadows.
We started seeing immigration from non-traditional nations, of people of different other races, other religions, other cultures, non-traditional nations from demographic backgrounds that actually, in many cases, have a much harder time assimilating, and in many cases just simply can't, as a group, assimilate. And so, I mean, we have people who have been here for hundreds of years, people of African heritage who have not fully assimilated into the American society, or people of European heritage have assimilated to them.
So this douchebag right here is saying that black people haven't assimilated into American society. You know, black people have been free since the Civil War. Black people have had rights since Jim Crow ended, since the Civil Rights movement. And they have made America their own. Who are you to say what their America is? Especially when it was white supremacist douchebags like you that went over there, stole them from their country and made them slaves and brought them here. And now that they have their rights, you're going to say that they're not assimilated. No, motherfucker, you're not assimilated.
That is cult-like behavior.
You know, and that's the problem with these douchebags. It's always me, poor me, I'm the victim. Look at all the power I have, look at all of my representation in our government, but I'm the fucking victim here because I'm not surrounded by a sea of fucking white, and they're just cowards and they're crybabies, and I'm loving that I'm doing this series right now. I was actually talking to somebody in Richard Spencer's group a year or so ago, and I was gonna have him come on the channel, and I was gonna really, you know, have a dialogue with him, and I was talked out of that, and I'm glad that I did, because these people are good talkers, and on the spur in a live situation, you can't really consider your response to them. And like, I wouldn't have been able to look up that Immigration Act of 1965, see how he was twisting the truth there to fit his narrative, but it's so easy to do when you have a moment to actually look it up, when you have a moment to think about your response. These people are easily defeated. But this was just part one of a 4-part video, as I'm going to cover a good chunk of this interview. I think this interview was important. If you want to check it out in full, you can find it on the TYT network. Go check it out. It's worth the watch. I mean, if you can stomach seeing just really, really terrible human beings spew their terrible shit, it's worth the watch.
No Trump! No KKK! No fascist USA! No Trump! No KKK! No fascist USA! No Trump! No KKK! No fascist USA!
But as always, I'm your boy Nakasuchi. This is A Raging Atheist. If you like my videos, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, share me on your social media, comment in the comment section below. Let me know what you think about the video, about the alt-right, about this douchebag. And I'm sure I'm going to get some of you Nazis responding. I always do. That being said, I'll see y'all soon.